Hello, bonjour and welcome to your new Bonheur Private Wines video. After explaining and visiting the wines from the Washington state a couple of weeks ago and Oregon in our last video, we're continuing today our tour of the West Coast with, of course, California. You can't miss California on the West Coast. California is, as you know, a massive state in its size, and it's also really huge as a wine country. So this video is not going to be about detailing every little aspect of every corner of it, but rather giving you a broad overview of the state when it comes to wine. I'm guessing you know what is Northern California as opposed to SoCal, but do you know which wines are actually made in Northern California? What are the names associated with wines over there? And do you know what's the Central Coast, the Central Valley, or the Sierra Foothills? Those areas that you hear about when you're in the wine world? Well, that's what this video is here exactly to explain. Let's go. In wine terms, Northern California is often referred to as the North Coast because it's this large area broadly neighboring the coastline north of San Francisco, and it is home to what's sometimes referred to as the aristocracy of American wines. In general, some of the most famous appellation names are in California are located there. And yes, you probably know the Napa Valley and the Sonoma County in particular. I made a full video a while ago about Napa versus Sonoma and their differences, so you can go and watch that video right here for all the intricate details. The North Coast is great because it's warm enough to grow fantastic grapes. It's still California, but not too hot so as to really cook the fruit. You get these localized and varied oceanic influences that change from one subvalley to the next. You have all these cold fog coming in at night, and that stays there until the morning, so it remains relatively cool overall, even in Napa Valley sometimes. Note that lesser known yet significant wine areas of Northern Cal include the Marin County, just south of Sonoma, and the Lake County, north of Sonoma. So it's not all about just Napa and Sonoma. The name Central Valley is not one you hear said all that much in the wine world because it generally doesn't come written on the wine labels. That's as simple as this. Yet it is responsible for a huge part of the state's wine output. It's where everything grows in California. Everything vegetable, everything agriculture comes from the Central Valley mainly. This is a massive 400-mile long valley that runs parallel to the coastline, but about 100 miles inland. Fresno, between San Francisco, Los Angeles through Fresno, well, that's the Central Valley. Grapes grow well here given you irrigate abundantly for sure. Too great perhaps, as the Central Valley only makes the bulk of the wine production, generally providing these cheap juice that you find labeled as generic California brands in supermarkets. The exception here is an appellation called Lodi, just a little southeast of Sacramento, to the north of the Central Valley. They've been making wine for a long time there, so you often find extremely old, often century-old vines there, old vines Zinfandel, in particular in Lodi, which allows them to make really interesting, big, concentrated, but quality wines, and a lot of traditional know-how, savoir-faire in Lodi as well. So they make great wines, even though it is technically located in the Central Valley. Don't overlook Lodi. The long strip of land east of Northern California and the north of the Central Valley on the foothills of the Sierra Nevada is called the Sierra Foothills AVA. It's quite telling, the name. It's a very hilly, if not mountainous, area ranging from 1,000 feet to 3,000 feet. It was, of course, historically the epicenter of the California gold rush around El Dorado County. Vines were planted there by the Spanish there way before the gold rush in the 1700s something, I think, and vines were obviously grown throughout the gold rush and the migration, but the vineyards were largely abandoned during the Prohibition and until the 1970s. So this area has sort of was forgotten about, but winemakers have rediscovered this zone, however, over the past few decades, as they found extremely old vines of Zinfandel again, in particular there, that had survived over all of those decades. Altitude, as we know, is a big benefit that preserves acidity and freshness in this otherwise really hot and continental climate. So because of this altitude, well, winemakers can take full advantage of the acidity and the freshness to make variety of reds, particularly Zinfandel, Cabernet, Syrah, even the Italian Barbera, some red blends as well. So that's a patchy but very interesting zone to explore when it comes to wine. One winery here, one winery there, one little valley here and there. But once you find the right spot, you can find fantastic things in the Sierra Foothills. What we call the Central Coast of California in wine terms is this long stretch of coastal land that goes from essentially San Francisco to Los Angeles. It extends from the coastline all the way inland to the Central Valley. So there are some very coastal vineyards, but also rather continental ones as well. But that's the Central Coast. It runs for 280 miles and is quite wide as well. So you can't just generalize about it and just talk about it as one big block. It's extremely varied, both in terms of climate and terroir. Each producer, each vineyard is going to be different. For this reason, they famously grow excellent Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays in these areas, so ones that have some cooling oceanic influence, but they also make Cabernet Sauvignon and Zinfandel and Syrah and Rhone grapes in the warmer parts. Sauvignon Blanc is also excellent from there. So from north to south, the most prominent wine appellations and names that you need to have in mind or that you need to look into and investigate are in the San Francisco Bay right to the north, the Contra Costa County, the Livermore Valley, you got the Santa Clara Valley and the Santa Cruz Mountains. You go a little south in the Monterey County, the Carmel Valley, Arroyo Seco and Chalone. Further south is the San Luis Obispo County with the Edna Valley, Paso Robles or Paso Robles, York Mountain and Arroyo Grande. And finally the Santa Barbara County just north of Los Angeles and AVAs such as the Happy Canyon, Santa Maria Valley, Santa Ynez and Santa Rita Hills. You see there's lots of different names, very diverse, very patchy, a bit like in Burgundy. I suppose every valley has a different name and a different expression. It's very diverse, the Central Coast is, and that's why people love it in the wine world, because there's loads and loads and loads to explore. Winemakers can be really creative and exploit those different vineyards that they have in different locations. And finally, Southern California isn't home to a lot or massive viticulture anymore. It used to be where some of the first Franciscan monks in the first Californian missions did plant the first vineyards in the state for producing sacramental wines, but now urbanization has changed the landscapes, of course, and that's very obvious, Los Angeles, San Diego and more, and not so many vineyards are left. They're all more anecdotal than anything else, at least from an outsider's perspective. Those wines don't leave this area very much. They're drunk on site, I would say. They're more consumed locally on wine excursion weekends by the people of Los Angeles or San Diego that just go on a wine traveling weekend in those areas, the local wineries, so a lot of those wines are drunk here or in local restaurants. But there are some very interesting wines, very interesting AVAs in this area, because grapes and vines enjoy the hot local climate, like in those AVA names that are quite prominent, the Cucamonga Valley, the Ventura County also, or the Temecula Valley is quite famous a name. There are even wines made in or around Malibu, in Los Angeles and San Diego counties as well. Yeah, there are. And yeah, this was your quick guide to all of the wonders and extraordinary variety that is found in California. The broad picture, at least, that I hope that has given you an overview of how granulous California wine countries are, how diverse, how many different AVAs there are, small valleys, microclimates that you can find while exploring your wine bottles or exploring, driving around wine country. Remember at least that there's much more to it than just Napa Valley and Sonoma. It's not too dissimilar in one way from what you'd find in European countries, in that every valley, every hill sometimes has a different name that is reflected on the label, with the difference perhaps that there's not an absolutely unique or distinctive grape or wine style grown in each of those different AVAs like you would find in Italy. Each small area in Italy, sometimes France, would have a distinct grape. It's always the same grapes, generally speaking, in California, even though they do explore more and more, but there are very, very localized expressions. A lot of passion too. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you soon in the wonderful world of vino. Cheers!